What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. Yesterday, we posted a video on the 13 teams that have a chance to make the college football playoff. Iowa, Wisconsin, both of these teams were not on that list. I had several comments about these two teams in particular and saying that Wisconsin and Iowa should be on that list, and these are playoff contenders potentially. So we're going to do a reality check here. Iowa, Wisconsin, will one of these two teams make the college football playoff in 2021? So let's go back to the comments that got me going on this video. Griffin Ellis said, I would also have Iowa and Wisconsin. I thought Hanzo the Razor had a really good point here. He said, until the rest of the Big Ten can catch up to Ohio State, there is a very little chance that any team from the Big Ten gets into the playoff. That being said, I think this is the best season in a long time that the Buckeyes can be upset. Their defense was abused by Alabama and Indiana, so there is the blueprint on how. Yes, I think Ohio State's defense could have some big question marks this year. I don't disagree with that. Again, going back to the first part of this, this does seem like no one has really caught up to Ohio State in the Big Ten. And I'm not saying that Ohio State can't lose a game. Ohio State could absolutely lose a game this year. But we're talking about Iowa and Wisconsin. You're going to need more than just an upset win in the Big Ten championship game. When you look at the regular season, could these two teams run the table or even finish a one loss? We're going to talk about that in just a second. Also, Spicy said Iowa, Florida, and Penn State all have small chances, and I definitely put Wisconsin in the top 13. These teams, I guess, would have a very small chance, but really with the list that I put out, I was saying, these teams have at least a 1% chance to get in the playoff. I'd say these teams have less than a 1% chance to get in. Penn State's interesting. We may actually talk about them a little bit more. Florida, I just don't really see them being able to get through the SEC this year. And again, Iowa, Wisconsin, that's who we're talking about here. Another comment was, I'd put Wisconsin, maybe Iowa on this list. They have a shot to go undefeated in the regular season with their schedule and could upset either Ohio State, unlikely, or get in with one loss similar to North Carolina. So that would be running the table, going undefeated in the regular season, and then losing in the conference championship game. Notre Dame fan said Iowa probably plays OSU tougher than anyone in the Big Ten. And then Clarence said those teams are always trying to upset Ohio State to make it. Those teams need to win every game and play as if it's Ohio State every game. Seems like they lose a game or two, even three, to teams that they shouldn't. And that's the big thing there. Even if you do pull off the upset over Ohio State, you still got to beat everyone else, which is very hard to do. And again, we're going to get to that in just a second. Notre Dame fan also said, I'm surprised you didn't include Wisconsin and Iowa and Cal in the top 15 teams to make it in. Not really sure where Cal came from. But again, I don't even think I posted every comment here. There were several comments on Iowa and Wisconsin. Everyone talking about those two teams. Clarence said they can make it like any of those teams. Miracles do happen, but still believe that quarterback, running back, and wide receiver play with Wisconsin and Iowa is just not elite at best. Good on some days, especially when they play elite schools. Joseph said, what Iowa quarterback were you watching last year? He was at one point the least accurate quarterback in the Power 5 when throwing the ball 10-plus yards. Not a recipe for the college football playoffs. So some back and forth here, and there were actually more replies to these comments. You can go back and read all the comments, of course, to the video. And if you missed that video, again, if you want to see the 13 teams that we said have a chance to make the playoff, go back and watch that video from yesterday. All right, so now I'm going to give you my take on Wisconsin and Iowa, and it's a little bit different for each team. I think one team has a better shot than the other, and I'll tell you why. So we're going to start with Wisconsin. Here is the schedule for Wisconsin. Let's rewind to last year, and you look at this team. They started off the season playing really well. Remember, they beat Illinois 45-7. They beat Michigan 49-11. We didn't know Michigan was going to be terrible, but still, that even as bad as Michigan was, that was still an impressive win. 49-11 on the road, even though there were no fans. Then they lose to Northwestern by 10. They lose to Indiana 14-6. They lose to Iowa by 21. Remember, they had some issues at wide receiver, had some injuries. Everything just kind of unraveled. And when you go back to 2020, it was such a wacky year that I don't put too much stock into that season. All three of these losses were against good teams. Then they beat Minnesota in overtime, and they were able to beat Wake Forest in the bowl game. So again, this team had their ups and downs, but they didn't lose to any bad teams. This is a good football team. They will be a good team in 2021. When we talk about the roster for Wisconsin, though, there are some question marks. There are definitely some question marks for them. Graham Mertz, can he take that next step at the quarterback spot? It seems like Jalen Berger going to be that next guy at running back for them. They need someone to emerge. Offensively, I'm not too worried about this team. They do lose Cole Van Lannon and John Dietzen on the offensive line. Those are big losses, and I know they seem to reload on the offensive line maybe as good as anyone in college football, but still, you got to replace those guys. And then on the defensive line, you lose Loudermilk, ran 2 big losses there on the defensive line, and then Wild Goose and Burrell there in the secondary, also going to be pretty big losses for them. And they didn't really bring any impact transfers or anything. So we're looking at Wisconsin as being, in my opinion, a good football team. I think they're probably the favorite to win the Big Ten West. So this is the team that I'm really focusing in on here as far as one of these teams being able to make the college football playoff. But then you look at this schedule. You've got Penn State. Penn State's going to be much better this year. You've got Notre Dame. Going to be a very tough game. Michigan should bounce back this year. You've got Iowa, who beat Wisconsin by 3 touchdowns, like I mentioned. You've got a Rutgers team on the road that is starting. The more I look into Rutgers, the more I start to think this could be a mid-tier team in the Big Ten this year. They have really started to turn things around, and we saw that last season. You've got Minnesota on the road. Minnesota is probably going to be better this year. Looking at this schedule, does anyone really think that Wisconsin can win every game on this schedule? I think that's really just going to be very tough for them to do. And again, I don't see Wisconsin or Iowa being able to beat Ohio State. I think, yeah, upsets happen, but I just don't see that happening. And again, when you look at this schedule and you look at the fact that they would have to either run the table or lose just one game and beat Ohio State, I just find that very unlikely. So yes, I think Wisconsin might be a top 15, maybe even a top 13, 10 team. You know, they might be in the top 13 teams. I don't think that they have a real shot to make the college football playoff just because there are too many challenges on the schedule and there's not much separation. When I look at these teams and I really started to break down all the teams in the Big Ten and the Big Ten West, I just don't see much separation. Wisconsin and Iowa look like they're probably the best 2 teams. I don't know that for sure, but they're not way above Nebraska. They're not way above Purdue. They're not way above, all these teams are kind of the same. Minnesota's a team that I think can maybe make a run in that division this year. Wisconsin just doesn't have enough separation, or Iowa, to say that they can go through, run the table in the Big Ten. I just don't see that happening. And then we talk about Iowa here. I'll show you the schedule for them going back to last season. What did they do? They got off to a rough start, losing to Purdue and Northwestern, but then they got really, really hot. They didn't lose another game, and I think that's why there's a lot of hype for Iowa coming into this year. They beat Michigan State in a blowout, Minnesota in a blowout, Penn State by 20, Nebraska by 6, Illinois by a couple touchdowns, Wisconsin by 3 touchdowns. So you look at the way they finished the season and you think, yeah, Iowa is a team that could be really dangerous this year. And I'll be honest, when I first started evaluating these teams for 2021, I thought that exactly. I thought, yeah, Iowa, this team is going to be really dangerous. This is probably going to be a team that wins the division. But then when you look at their roster and you look at everything that they lost, it's just going to be hard, I think, to duplicate the success that they had last season. Spencer Petras will be back. He should take a step forward, but he was not great last year. I mean, he was not bad for them. But you do lose Sargent at running back. They do bring back Goodson, though, so I think they'll be fine at running back. But at the wide receiver position, they're going to lose Brandon Smith. They're going to lose Smith Marset, 2 big-time playmakers for them. On the offensive line, they lose several guys, including Alaric Jackson. That's a big, big loss. I think they actually lose maybe all 5. They lose 5 guys on the offensive line. I don't know for sure if they were all starters. Those are big losses. Chauncey Golston at defensive line. This is a really, really good player that they're losing. Jack Heflin, another guy there. And they lose 3 defensive tackles from last season. At linebacker, they lose 3 guys at linebacker as well. So when you look at the roster here for Iowa, and then you look to the schedule, you think, is this a team that's going to be able to run the table on this schedule? You've got Indiana. That's going to be a very tough game to start the season off. And then you've got Iowa State, which is why that game right there is probably the reason why I think Wisconsin has a better shot than Iowa to maybe make a run. But I don't really see, Iowa's probably not going to beat Iowa State. Iowa State looks loaded this year, but it is a rivalry, so you never know. They also play Penn State out of the East. That's going to be a tough game. They have Wisconsin on the road, Nebraska on the road, Northwestern on the road. Just going down the list here, does anyone really think Iowa can run the table and win all of these games? Do you really think that they can get through this schedule with one loss and then beat Ohio State? I'm sorry, I just don't see it happening. So that's why I did not include Wisconsin and Iowa on my 13 teams that could make the college football playoff. That being said, do they have a chance, any chance? So let's go to the reality meter. And again, we're talking about Iowa or Wisconsin making it to the college football playoff. If you're not familiar with this, this is the scale that we use just to kind of do a reality check on certain topics. And this is one I felt like doing. So where does this land on the reality meter? I'm not going to say there is no chance, because again, we're talking about two quality football programs, two really good head coaches, and we're talking about teams that, when you look at their schedules, will have a chance in pretty much every game they play. It's not like they're going to be huge underdogs, except for a potential game against Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship. So it could happen, but winning every game or losing just one game and beating Ohio State, the odds of one of those two things happening are so low. I'm going to put this at 2. I'm going to say it's not impossible. So for those of you wondering about Iowa and Wisconsin, I'm not going to say they have no chance. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I think it's very, very, very unlikely and not enough of a chance for me to put either one of these teams in my 13 teams that could make the college football playoff in 2021. So that is my take. That's why, hopefully I explained it good enough to where you guys understand why I don't see either one of these teams making it. And I just don't see them being contenders. Could one of them go 10-2, make it to the Rose Bowl? Absolutely. These are quality programs. Again, teams that could have really good years. Both of them have potential, especially Wisconsin. Iowa, I'm just afraid, lost a little bit too much. But making the college football playoff, making that jump into the playoff, it's a big deal, and I just don't see it happening for either one of these teams. So I'm going to say it's not impossible. That's where it lands on the reality meter, a number 2. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think? I know there are some, obviously, that think that these two teams should be in that conversation based off of the comments from yesterday, but I'm just not buying it. I'm just not buying either one of these teams. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Give me your feedback again down below. Please subscribe to the channel. Help us out as we continue to build this channel back up this off season and gear up for what should be a great college football season in 2021.